Welcome to Charts Today. It is Wednesday, the 15th of July, and I start by looking at IBM. This is I really wondered whether there was a wrong price here. It was down 25% yesterday, and that is basically on a sales miss when they announced their results. The biggest fall in the IBM share price since 1968. Just unbelievable. And the key thing about a fall like this is that even though this target was activated with the fall, there was that move beforehand, the reactive move, and then the plummet. The key thing about that target, it just tells us that that bad news cannot be unwound. It's there, and so it really looks significant. And if we look at the chart, you can just see a lot of volatility here towards the end of the trend. Quite a nice steady trend, and then real volatility on the weekly chart. And we look at the 60-minute chart, we see here upside targets, downside targets, upside targets. There was a little downside target, which was given last week, but realistically, it didn't really give us a lot of clues that this was going to happen. But really interesting that is just the market. Looking at the other end of the scale, Goldman Sachs breaking up 9% to a new all-time high. This is the long-term chart, upside targets, and we can see here the 60-minute chart, the daily chart, and the 60-minute chart. Very different picture indeed. So we'll come back to the stocks, but I just wanted to start by looking at that. As I tend to, before recording Charts Today, have a quick look around the markets to know what I'm going to talk about. And we look at Bitcoin, very flat here, below the cloud on the, it was below the cloud on the 60-minute, but has recovered. But that 65,000 level is a push too far. We have got an upside target, but it is below the cloud. And of course, the long-term picture is pretty bearish. And the Nasdaq last night did fall away. IBM not in the Nasdaq, but it is really still struggling, and of course a few Nasdaq stocks did fall in sympathy with IBM, and we'll look at that shortly. But we still are struggling to make a new high. We do have an upside target, but this pattern is looking a little bit like a descending triangle building, and that's the key. There is just seeing lower highs. If we break below that 29,000 level, then we look to 28,500. We break below that, and that starts to look a little bit worrying. But of course, on the daily chart, if we zoom in here, we do have a big upside target from that move, but we have got a consolidation pattern. Can we break higher and run again? Looking at the futures, up slightly on the S&P future, and the Nasdaq future up 0.6% as well. So it does look like we'll open slightly higher today. UK market is actually down 0.2%, and the DAX in Germany down 1.2%. Germany's woes quite interesting here. We are seeing that potential downside target, and if we look at the bond markets, Germany has actually just recently given an upside target, and that's on the 60-minute chart. It's not quite activated yet this morning, but we have got these upside targets, and this new upside target is suggesting higher rates in Europe, and Italy also giving a new upside target to 4.5%. So that is quite a big move on the interest rate, and the UK has got a similar picture as well. So 5.5% there, higher than Eurozone. Coming back to the markets themselves, we're seeing the CAC 40 in Paris has been fairly flat, struggled to make a new high. Germany only made a new high and then couldn't hold on to it. Japan up 1%. Yen weakness has been the factor here, and this market has gone from 20,000 to 37,000 in just a little over a year. The Sensex in India up slightly, and the not yet activating that bigger upside target, and the Aussie market still waiting to see which way we're going to break. Looking at the short term, no clear picture there either. Brent crude remains elevated. We are seeing on the short term chart 87.50 is the level to watch here. We did put our energy report out to clients earlier today, and we have suggested that we might just pause at these levels, having run a long way. A lot depends on the news flow out of the Middle East, of course. Cocoa, this has big upside targets. It's a recovery play, really. And remembering what happened to cocoa when we look at the long-term chart, went from 2000 to from 2000 to 12,000 very quickly in 2023. Can we do that all over again with cocoa? Downside targets were met. We've got a new upside target. Coffee. This has been an interesting chart. It did hit that downside target almost and then bounced right back into the range. This did look like a double top, but it hasn't played out. And if we look at the short-term charts, we are in recovery mode. Sugar is another one that's been quite interesting. We did look like we might be in recovery mode here. Looks pretty bullish, but that 16 level really is a resistance level. If we look at the downside targets there, we make a new low on sugar. We've got a target to just below $10, having been at 27.50. These are the upside targets above the cloud, downside targets. We go into the daily chart. We've got a downside target here as well with a new low. Really have to watch that 13.25 level. And then on the short-term chart, we do have an upside target that would take us above 16, but that is counter trend, so we should not be surprised to see that not met. Just looking at a couple of other soft commodities, wheat, that has really moved higher. And we look at the daily chart, we've still got a downside target there, but it is recovering. Corn, also just waiting to see if we can activate that upside target. Now, gold is one that we've talked about a lot in the last few days. Back at this 4,000 level, sitting at 4,025 this morning. Can't really break these resistance levels. 4,200 is the level we need to break on gold. Clear resistance there. There are sellers emerging. I read yesterday a lot of people are selling their gold, their physical gold held in the US for just fears of political intervention, and maybe that is driving the price lower. But the key thing here is on the chart, that 4,000, 4,200 level is going to be quite key. Silver, 57.63 is the range, and we're sitting at 58 at the moment. So we are again struggling, and that is a bit like a descending triangle as well. Palladium, we've talked about just bucking the trend a little bit, and you can see here that is looking a bit stronger on that short-term chart, and we've got an upside target that has been activated, but it is counter trend, of course. SpaceX, this was a big one yesterday, down. Look at that. That's really not great. Looking at the 60-minute chart, hitting the targets. Apple struggling to make a new high. It did make an intraday high, but couldn't hold on to it. And Microsoft actually continuing to be weak. That was the one that was down yesterday in the Mag 7. And Nvidia were up 4%. So quite a different picture there from IBM. You can see that most of the Dow was down. The Nasdaq, we had quite a few stocks down on the Nasdaq as well. And Intuit, it's quite interesting. ARM down 6%, Adobe down 4%. These recoveries, weak recoveries, when we look at the daily chart, that's why you have to be really cautious of recoveries, really. Intuit's another one. That's been, from a software perspective, that hasn't been great either. Looking at the UK market this morning, just very, very quickly, it's a sea of red, basically. So really only a handful of stocks breaking the trend there. Burberry, Persimmon. But these charts are not great. Polar Capital is one that has looked fantastic. But again, maybe hitting some resistance with a downside target at a double top. That's it for today. Enjoy the football tonight. UK versus Argentina. Can we get to the final with Spain? It'll be interesting to watch. Until tomorrow, happy charting. Bye for now.